Hello there. Now, red kites were once abundant in the UK. However, during the 18th and 19th centuries, the species declined dramatically due to human persecution. Now, this was partly due to gamekeepers because they believed that red kites were taking up game birds, which they weren't, while demand for egg collectors and taxidermists also increased their demise. And this eventually led to their extinction in England in 1871 and Scotland in 1879. So it was not until the 1960s that red kite populations they started to recover. This was thankfully due to the banning of organic chlorine pesticides and also the recovery of the rabbit population from myxomatosis, because rabbits are a key food source for red kites. And since 1989, up to 650 red kites have been reintroduced to England, and this has resulted in a re-established population, resulting in 1,800 individuals. So there's been a massive explosion increase, which is amazing for the species and indeed for conservation. It is thanks to reintroductions like Howard House, the red kites now inhabit 3 out of the original 1 countries that they did during the decline. So it just shows that this reintroduction has been successful, and red kites are on the way to making a great recovery across the whole of the UK, covering both Scotland, England and Wales. So you have heard the background about red kites, so now both Theo and I are going to talk in more detail about the types of management methods used for red kite conservation.
Hello, my name's Theo and I'm coming in live from Askenburg, ready to answer some questions on the reintroduction history of red kites, as well as topics surrounding this. Without further ado, let's get started.
Question 1 is inbreeding depression. So this is where 2 individuals who are genetically related mate amongst themselves, and this can occur more within small populations. And this can cause issues such as the loss of alleles, as well as an increase in homozygosity. Now, how many female individuals was the Welsh red kite population derived from in the 1930s from DNA sampling?
DNA sampling was done through feather samples, which ensures minimal disturbance to the birds and was inexpensive, quick and required minimal technology. This DNA sampling helped to determine the need for reintroduction to enhance the gene pool. Now let's go back to Red for the next question.
So question 2 is demographic stochasticity. So this is a random event that affects individuals within the population and can happen in an unpredictable way. So this can include either the birth or death of individuals within that population, and both can have major consequences. So, from the Welsh red kite population in the 1930s, what would have been a stochastical event?
This will be A, because as we now established that the red kite population in Wales was derived from one single female, her death would have a profound effect on the Welsh kite population. This would likely result in species extinction. Fortunately, she was able to continue breeding and keep raising chicks to maintain a small Welsh population until the reintroduction program was established in 1989. This is something that should not be underestimated in terms of importance, as population can fluctuate by way of demographic stochasticity. Thereby, it can be considered a relief that the female was able to remain fertile until the start of the reintroduction project, otherwise the outcome would have been regrettably very different.
Question 3 is genetic stochasticity and genetic drift. So genetic drift is the random events causing beneficial alleles to disappear or become fixed, and both can reduce genetic variation and lead towards extinction. So red kite allele frequency has increased since the 1980s. How many allele mutations were detected in red kite populations after 2010? which could have been as a result of either mutation or migration.
Here the answer is 2. Although a small number of new alleles were detected in DNA studies, this is still an improvement compared to the previous decline. Red kite studies are continuing to develop, and it is hoped that this will detect more genetic diversity as isolated populations start to interbreed with introduced populations, showing that if correctly managed, the process of encouraging reintroduced individuals to breed with existing wild individuals can result in huge beneficiaries for populations of this raptor species. Back to you, Red.
So question 4 is environmental stochasticity. So this is unexpected fluctuations within an environment that can affect the dynamics of populations within that environment. A red kite biotic factor would be food availability. Red kites do catch live animals, but they also consume roadkill, so that means they are scavengers. However, being scavengers, this has led to a high percentage of young red kite mortality within the population. What is the cause of this mortality?
There is currently a proposal to ban the use of lead shots in and or near waterways within the EU, and it is likely the UK will still have to follow these laws as they are still bound by selected EU regulations, with the date of the consultancy ending in 2022. Organisations like Wildfowl and Wetlands Trusts are seeking alternatives to toxic shot with steel shot instead of lead. It is hoped that this will reduce bird mortality and environmental contamination. Regarding the history of human red kite conflicts, it is perhaps worth knowing that during Victorian times, the population in London was devastated by free shooting of the individuals due to their perceived status as a pest species. This directly relates to their scavenger status. Modern laws and regulations aside, it is inconceivable that humans may repeat this behaviour 200 years later.
So now we're going to move on to the types of in situ and ex situ conservation methods and how those affect red kites. So question 5 is ex situ conservation. So this is where animals are protected and raised outside their natural environment. So to help the UK red kite population, fledglings were taken from Sweden and Spain and raised in captivity within the UK. What are some of the advantages of ex situ conservation?
With this question, there are in fact 2 answers. A captive bred species can be reintroduced in the wild, A, and C, allows longer life expectancy for the target individuals. Unlike UK red kites, European individuals are migratory. This may result in greater genetic diversity through interaction as separate populations interbreed. International breeding is a considerably significant step towards improving the genetic diversity of the relevant individuals and has a knock-on effect of improving the wider population as a whole. Disease-resistant alleles are a valuable part of any species' genetics as it often increases the lifespan of individuals.
Final question, question 6, is about in situ conservation. So this is where animals are monitored and protected in their own habitat through on-site conservation. So to monitor the UK red kite population, which methods are used for individual identification as well as for the process of monitoring distance and also for the personal progression of individuals?
These is most applicable. It is in fact all of these methods. Yeah, they are all valuable in monitoring red kite populations as they ensure that maximum information is achieved to get an accurate assessment of the monitored population and distribution. The advantages of in situ conservation include 1. Ensures that the correct conditions for evolution and adaptation are provided. 2. It preserves target populations in their natural surroundings. And 3. It is less expensive than ex situ conservation. Before I disappear, I'd like to add that if you don't happen to know what a red kite looks like, but would like to be able to, then it's simple. The red kite is the only raptor species in the UK with a forked tail. This visual clue, if spotted, guarantees the correct identification of the species. Now, that's all from me here. Thank you for listening, and back to you.
So that concludes our sections for red kites. We will now move on to Kel, who's going to talk about conservation genetics in beavers.
The Eurasian beaver is from the family Castoridae. The area of their distribution covers a huge territory from northeastern Europe to central Eurasia. Their most common habitat tends to be rivers and lakes that border woodland. In this habitat they feed on aquatic plants, tree bark and leaves. Adult Eurasian beavers do not have any natural predators and tend to live for between 7 and 8 years. Beavers build both dams and lodges. These dams restrict water flow and create ponds of still, deep water. Within these ponds they construct lodges where they live safe from predators. The dams are made up of felled trees that are divided up and dragged into place by the beavers, while the lodges are made up of sticks and branches held together with mud. By building dams they create new wetland habitats that benefit a host of other species. Dams can also reduce flood risk, increase water storage and improve water quality. However, measures may be required to limit any negative impacts on agricultural land. There are many populations of beavers in the UK, however many of these are in close populations. Where in the UK are beavers currently present in the wild? A. Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. B. The Humber, the River Tay and Kielder Forest. C. Knapdale, the River Tay and the River Otter. Or D. Somerset, Reading and Essex.
The answer is C. Knapdale, Argyll in Scotland, the River Tay in Scotland, and the River Otter in Devon are the only places in the UK with wild, free-ranging beavers. However, there are many ex situ captive populations spread across Scotland, England, and Wales.
Are beavers affected by the allele effect?
Here the answer is yes. Yes, they are. The allele effect is when there is a positive association between some fitness component, e.g. viability, juvenile survivorship or fecundancy, and population size, where there haven't been any studies specifically on the allele effect in beavers. It can be assumed that as they live in family groups, are highly sociable and dependent on the individuals around them, that yes, they are affected by the allele effect.
Which factor of demographic stochasticity was shown to heavily impact beaver populations? A. Kit mortality rate, B. Fecundity, C. Emigration, or D. Subadult mortality?
The correct answer is A. Kit mortality rate. That's correct. In a study attempting to model Eurasian beaver populations in Scotland, kit mortality rates were found to be highly variable and uncertain. This was due to limited data collected from observational studies, as kit are often kept in the beavers' dens until a certain age, making it hard to determine the number of kits and their survival rates.
Has the Eurasian beaver experienced a bottleneck that impacts their genetic diversity today?
The answer is yes. Extensive hunting until the beginning of the 20th century meant that the Eurasian beaver population was dramatically reduced and only a few populations remained. And these were in isolated locations. In these small isolated populations and captive populations, the loss of genetic diversity in small or captive populations through genetic drift and inbreeding was observed.
What environmental factor affects beaver populations in the UK? A. Flooding, B. Disease, C. Predation, or D. culling?
D. Culling. Unfortunately, culling is the biggest threat there is to beavers via human-animal conflict. While the Scottish Government has formally recognised beavers as native species, they are yet to receive legal protection and be culled by landowners without regulation infringement of any sort. Meaning the chances of a successful reintroduction may be impacted by culling from landowners where beavers are present.
True or false? eDNA can be used to identify whether beavers are present in waterways.
True, the utilisation of eDNA has been used to identify the presence of beavers, mostly through fecal or water samples. In fact, it has been very useful in tracking the invasive North American beaver, Castor cadensis, in Finland, as it is often hard to identify differences between the two species, such as Castor canadensis has reddish black coat and Castor fiber has brownish reddish. That's all there is from me here. It's been an enjoyable experience to answer these questions about two reintroduced species, red kites and Eurasian beavers. Goodbye everybody, it's been a pleasure.